Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to another episode of the Raw Prospect Podcast. It's good to be back. It's December 13th, 2023, and today we're doing our first in-season NBA episode of the season. We've had our first NBA in-season tournament. We've had a lot of breakout teams. We've had a lot happen already. We're about a quarter of the way into the season, and we're going to be talking about our top 10 power rankings and then getting into a little bit of NBA gut check at the end. But before we get into all that, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Leave a like on the video. Go over to your podcasting platforms and give us a 5-star rating review. That will really help us out. And joining me from Houston, Texas, the stat king himself, Mr. McElween. How you doing?
Hey everybody, welcome into another great edition of the Raw Prospect Podcast. First NBA episode of the season, and we are currently sitting at December 13th, 12 days away from Christmas Day, and you know what that means in the NBA. So I'm excited for this. We're doing our quarter season, I guess you would call it, top 10 power rankings, and we'll get into a gut check segment at the end of the show. 10 to 15 minutes after this show ends, we'll have another show for you that'll be deep in the heart of Longhorn sports. So make sure you like and subscribe to everything that we're doing here on the Raw Prospect Podcast YouTube channel. I had some good insights last night on Dit Hole. Hopefully you listened to that. I'll be revealing what the mysterious liquid was in the mug that I was drinking from last night on tonight's episode of Dit Hole. So that's something else for you guys to look forward to. And so be sure you tune in. If for nothing else, you can make fun of me for or react to what I was drinking last night. So with all that being said,
No, I'm curious.
Let's go into our power rankings. I'm interested to hear because we haven't really talked a whole lot of NBA with each other since the season started elsewhere other than our fantasy basketball chat. So you want to kick us off?
Yeah, at number 10, I have the New York Knicks. I think New York this season has done a few things that have really caught my eye and made it so that they're more stabilized near the front of the Eastern Conference. I know recently they've slipped down to sixth in the Eastern Conference standings, but the entirety of the season and the way they're playing right now as well, even without Mitchell Robinson in the lineup, I think has been overwhelmingly positive. And the big thing that they've done that's really changed how they play offensively is their willingness and ability to shoot and hit the three ball consistently. The defense has been there for them, the last 3 seasons, really. The difference this year is their key guys are taking and making their threes. And not only does that help them in terms of just the math that is the NBA nowadays, which is all about statistics and all those types of things, but their 3-point differential is much better. They're not losing out on that part of the game as much as they have in the past. And with their defense as good as it is and how good Jalen Brunson has been, I really like what this team is doing and what they're building.
I actually agree with you to start us off. The New York Knicks are my number 10 team, and there were a couple teams as kind of with our NFL power rankings that you could put in this spot. I look at the Knicks right now at 13-9, and here's basically what it boils down to. If I had to give them a grade for this first quarter of the year, I'd give them a B+. I really like what I'm seeing from the Knicks. I think they can find a balance between Jalen Brunson killing. He's averaging almost 25 a game. Julius Randle, who's been playing some really good team basketball. and RJ Barrett continuing to seemingly make another leap in his development. Um, the defense is going to suffer a little bit with the Mitchell Robinson injury, but I think the Knicks look really good. They look a little dangerous. The question still remains, can they crash through what is a perceived to be second round ceiling in the Eastern Conference? But we're talking about these power rankings in current form as these teams are constructed in their current form. I think the Knicks are really good. Uh, it feels like a lock. I mean, right now they're top 10 in offensive and defensive rating, and they have a net rating of 3.7. Um, there are arguments for other teams, but I went with the Knicks as well.
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of good going on in New York right now, which we haven't been able to say too often throughout our lifetime, at least. So for number 9, for me, this is where I had Dallas. This is where I had my team, the Dallas Mavericks, and that may seem a little low considering they're 15-9, just beat the Lakers last night. Them coming off their in-season tournament championship, of course, but if you look at their strength of schedule compared to the other teams on this list, and how they fared against those top teams, it really changes. It really skews where I think this team is actually at and the level of basketball they're actually playing. And that's not to say that they haven't made strides in certain aspects. They certainly have. For one, they've added more defensively this season. Grant Williams has been a nice addition. Derek Lively the second has been fantastic as a rookie, and he's had his rookie moments with foul trouble and things of that nature. But overall, he's been exactly what this team has needed, which is size on the interior and rim protection. But with all of that, with the additions they've made defensively, they're still sitting 22nd overall in defense. There's still questions about Kyrie's health. Right now, he's out with I believe it's a heel contusion, and there's no timetable set as of right now. And we both know those types of injuries where there's no set timetable right from the get go, those things can really spiral out of control. Um, Kawhi, like that type of thing. Which I'm not saying that's the same thing, but that's not a good sign when there's not a set timetable from the get go. So I do feel pretty good about where this Dallas team is at right now, but I think 9 is the right spot for them, given the strength of schedule right now, and also the questions that I still have with them defensively.
Yeah, I think 9 is a really good spot for Dallas. We agree once again. Look, I think with the Kyrie injury, people kind of thought Dallas might come back to earth just a little bit. And Jason Timpf on his podcast also mentioned the strength of schedule, and that was one of the reasons he had them barely off of his top 10 list. And I mean, there's a good argument to be made there, but I feel like at 15-8, despite a little 3-6 stretch to even things out, the Mavs continue to be a juggernaut on offense. When you have a player as good as Luka Doncic has been this year, and just listen to these numbers, I'm sure you know them, but for our audience, averaging 35 points this year, 9.2 rebounds, and 12.4 assists in the past 5 games. That includes a stretch of extraordinary, rare triple doubles. He had 36 points, 15 rebounds, and 18 assists in a failed comeback attempt against the Thunder last week on December 2nd. He's had a couple other amazing performances mixed in. They've been hit hard by injuries. We know about Kyrie's heel contusion, and we'll see where that ends up. But when you look at everything else, Derek Lively, the second, has been a really, really solid rookie. I really like him. I liked him coming out of Duke. I like that pick. back in the draft. They're getting good production off the bench most of the time. Some of the additions they made defensively as well have been pretty good. The question is, um, will any of this translate to the postseason other than just Luka being Luka? Right now, they're fourth in offensive rating, which is fantastic, and I kind of expected them to be really, really good offensively.
Yeah.
They're 22nd in defensive rating with a net rating of 3.2. So I think there are questions there, but right now you have to give them credit for beating teams that they should beat. And they're 15-8, right around a quarter of the way through the season. And I think you would have taken that if you had known that Kyrie was going to get hurt.
Yeah. One last thing I'll say on Dallas is there have been stretches of good defense.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's the positive thing for me being a Mavericks fan. Like going into the later stretches of the season where we know we're going to be facing much better competition later on, because this early part of the schedule this is the easy part of the schedule for us. So having that, knowing that at times that we're capable of that level of defense is good. And then also the strides that Luka has taken, I think, as a true point guard in a sense. And I know that sounds strange because he's always been a fantastic passer, but the team is playing much faster. He's making more just outlet passes just to get out on the break and run. And I think those little things and just his willingness to get down and dirty and box out and dive on the floor for loose balls, just be a little bit more into the details has been really good to see. And we've known for a while as Mavericks fans, his game has to evolve, like the usage rate, all those types of things. They've got to change. And it seems like it's starting to go in the right direction. So
Absolutely.
who did you have at number 8?
So at number 8, I had the Los Angeles Lakers. Obviously, they won the in-season tournament, and they looked great doing so. They have a pretty easy week with 2 games against San Antonio, both of which they should win. And we can talk about the Spurs another time. And then I believe they're playing the Knicks this upcoming weekend. So they've looked really good. But aside from all that, and aside from the fact that each player will receive their $500,000 lump sum payment on Friday for winning the in-season tournament, which I'm sure they're thrilled about. The Lakers are playing some really awesome basketball. They went 6-0 in the in-season tournament, but they're 8-9 outside of the in-season tournament. And we just saw a game against the Mavericks where they'll need to avoid performances like this moving forward, where they allowed 71 first half points to a really good offensive team, but that just can't happen. But I think at his best, what we've seen from Anthony Davis, especially defensively, how dominant and game-changing he can be on the defensive end of the floor when he's assertive offensively as well. The play of LeBron James, and what is this, his 22nd year in the NBA?
21st season,
21st season in the NBA. I love a lot of the additions that they made. Gosh, I'm blanking on his name right now. The wing that they added, Torian
Prince, yeah.
Torian Prince, I think has been really good for them. I like Jackson Hayes. I mean, I just like their length, their switchability on defense, and if you have LeBron James and Anthony Davis playing like they are, they're going to be a really good team. You could move them higher if you wanted to, but I want to see a little more. And I think eventually they're going to need to ease the load a little bit for LeBron moving forward if they want him to maintain his health throughout the season. So really like what I've seen from the Lakers, but I have them at 8 right now. They're 6th in defensive rating. They're a really solid defensive team as expected, but they still rank 22nd offensively. But despite all that, they won the in-season tournament, and they are what, 14-9, 14-10 right now. So that's where I have the Lakers.
Yeah, I went back and forth on who I wanted at this spot, but ultimately I decided to put the Orlando Magic at number 8. And I think here's the thing with the Magic. They have a bunch of really impressive standout wins. They've beat the defending champs, Denver Nuggets. They beat the Boston Celtics. Their defense has just been
Yep.
stellar. It's been incredible. And every time I turn on one of like a Magic game, I mean, their young guards, that trio of Anthony Black, Jalen Suggs, and Markel Fultz when he's healthy, but Cole Anthony was the one I was going to say. Those four guys defensively, they might have the best point of attack defense in the entire league. And that's saying a lot. Those four guys, they get after it, man. Jalen Suggs, to me, he looks like a young Marcus Smart with like more scoring upside. That's what he looks like to me. I mean, this team has so much potential and so much growth yet to do. The offense still hasn't been as efficient as you would expect it to be for a 17 win team this early in the season, but Paolo is still making strides. Franz Wagner is still making strides. I really like this Magic team. I just can't put them above the Lakers right now because of the ceiling that the Lakers have demonstrated. It's, I think, if you look at it this way, those are two elite defensive teams, but one team has two bona fide superstars, and one team, we're still, they have two stars, but we're still waiting and watching to see what their actual ceiling will be this season. And I know that's not what this ranking is, but I still think it's relevant.
Fair enough. I have the Magic at number 7, and look, I think the Lakers are probably better than the Magic over the course of the long term. But right now, I had the Magic at 7. I put these power rankings together uh, a couple days ago, though. So take that into consideration. What I will say, just to build off your point, though, on Orlando is their third in defensive rating. That's been huge. I think Jamal Mosley uh, is in the early running, if not a front runner for Coach of the Year. He has to be. Paulo Banchero has been excellent. He looks like the top 3 pick that he was. He's right now he's averaging almost 21 points per game. But over his last 11, he's averaging 23 and a half. I think there is a possibility. He's not close right now. But there's a possibility he could average, I think, this year closer to 24, 25 points per game than he will, I think, averaging 19, 20 points per game. I think he's really that good. They're hell to go against defensively. You mentioned the point of attack defense with their guards. They show flashes offensively, but I still think they're a step away from the upper echelon of the NBA and their consistency and their dynamic guard play and their consistency offensively. But Franz Wagner is legit. I think we knew that certainly coming into this season, and at some point last year, I think we saw what he's capable of. I think the Magic are legit in the Eastern Conference. I don't know, and I'm not saying that they're going to beat the Sixers or the Celtics, or they're going to get to the Eastern Conference Finals, or maybe even win a playoff series. But I really like what I see so far. They're right around middle of the pack right now in offensive rating. Need to see more consistency, though, over the course of the long term. But right now, for where they are, I would give them pretty close to an A+ for how the season has gone so far.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard not to. I mean, Jamal Mosley being a former Mavs assistant coach, I'm a little biased, but man, it's just hard like to not root for the guy when we watch it his press conferences or just the way he talks. I mean he knows what he's doing clearly. Okay, so number 7 now. Wait, 6 is what we're on now. So number 6 for me, I had Philly.
I agree with you.
Yeah, this season I had Philly as kind of the bad vibes team. Like everything going into the season was pointing towards like how is this thing going to stay together? It just looks like it's all falling apart. But the one thing that I didn't take into account was one, how good Tyrese Maxey actually is. And I knew he was good, but I didn't know he would come out of the gate like this. And two, how good of a hire Nick Nurse was. Because now you're seeing more emotion on offense, more cutting, more movement, and it's unlocked Joel Embiid's passing ability. It's making it harder to double team because teams are having to focus on cutters and watch shooters a little bit more and have to be a little bit more attentive. And those little things, little adjustments, make it that much more difficult to guard the Sixers offense. And I think those details are ones that translate to playoff time. And I know that's, like I said before, like this is a ranking of how they're playing right now, but it's just hard not to think big picture when you see the Sixers who have perennially lost in the second round because of their, well, it's because of a lot of different things, but some of it is the lack of detail and lack of, I guess, creativity offensively. And some of that is being implemented now. And it's hard to not get excited about it because it feels like things are starting to turn a corner for them. And ultimately, I think Tyrese Maxey and Embiid as a duo, you can put that up with almost any duo in the league. It's just whether or not they get enough stops when it comes down to it. When it, deciding whether or not they're going to go all the way or not. I mean,
Right.
I wouldn't call them, straight up contenders, but I would say they have a fighting chance for sure if things fall their way in terms of matchups.
Yeah, I think everything you said spot on. Their offense has been really, really good. Great, actually, when you look at the numbers without James Harden. They've unlocked a lot of things offensively without Harden. Tyrese Maxey has ascended. He's now a star. Joel Embiid is still unstoppable. And I think they're still going to be aggressive and probably make another move as we get closer to the trade deadline. They're very active. We will see what happens with their roster construct moving forward. The question just becomes who, and you're right, it's really hard not to think about the big picture when you're doing NBA power rankings. I just don't know if any of this current team can get beyond the second round of the playoffs, but they are really, really fun to watch, and they're going to be really good in the regular season because their offense is so good. They're second right now in offensive rating, and they're pretty good defensively. 112.1, at least statistically, ninth in the NBA defensively, and they have a net rating of 9. I don't. You look at their schedule. I'm not going to go deep into who they've beaten and who they haven't beaten, but I'm pretty sure they've already played the Celtics 3 times.
Yeah.
And when I've watched them this year, I like what I see. I have them right at the top of my tier 2. If I were to do a tiers list right now, I think they're right near the top of tier 2. They're not in my bona fide finals contenders, but they're the next level below that.
Yeah.
So
It's a little bit of a similar thing with how you look at the NFC in football right now with, the top three that are there, Cowboys, Eagles, 49ers. I think for the Sixers, if they're able to just face one of the top three rather than both, then I think they're contenders. I don't see them getting past both the Bucks and the Celtics, but if for whatever reason they only have to play one of them, then I would give them a shot for sure.
yeah, so my number 5 was Oklahoma City. Um, Look, I'm not sure how much better of a start you could ask for in Oklahoma City. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander has been an absolute monster. He's making a strong case for MVP right now. Um, he has the league's first 3-game stretch of 30-point, 3-steal games since James Harden back in 2020, according to ESPN Stats and Info. Um, and that's a feat that had only been accomplished uh, um, that had never been accomplished in the Thunder's franchise history. He's tied for 5th in the NBA in scoring, right now at 30.4 points per game. He leads the league in steals, which is huge on the defensive end of the floor. And the only players, and I know there's a long way to go in the season, but the only players to average as many points and steals in a season as Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is doing right now
Michael Jordan.
are Hall of Famers Allen Iverson, Michael Jordan, and Rick Barry. Those are the only players to do what Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is doing right now in those 2 categories. To add on to all of that, and the superstar that Shea Gilgeous-Alexander has become, Chet Holmgren has been absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
I think he's been the best rookie in the NBA this year, and I love Wemby, but I think given what I've seen from Chet, he's been the best rookie. Jalen Williams is an absolutely perfect running mate for SGA. And I think this Thunder team looked better than even I thought it would early on in the season. They're top 6 in both offense and defensive rating. They're 6th in offense and they're 5th in defense. They're sitting right now at, I believe, 15-7, unless that has changed here in the past couple hours. And Josh Giddey, what he's done this year has also been pretty impressive, considering he now has, uh, um, when I've watched him, he's been fantastic. So I'd give the Thunder an A grade for this first quarter of the season, considering where they're at on both ends of the floor in the construct of their roster. And I think they're a top 5 team right
Yeah.
now.
Agreed. I think this is our first disagreement, I guess. Disagreement in quotes, because it's not really that big of a deal. But number 5 is where I had the Milwaukee Bucks. I think it's definitely a difference in expectation, I guess, which I think skews my perception of things. But I think for the Bucks, a lot of I think the actual basketball on the court has been a little bit inconsistent for me. They've been winning a lot of close games against teams where, frankly, they shouldn't be in close games against, like, say, the Wizards, or throw in any random team, really, honestly. But the defense has really taken a huge step back, and I think that was to be expected, but I don't think people expected it to look like this. The point of attack defense has really been a problem, and I think that is something that eventually this close game. I'm not going to say close game luck because Dame is very adept at being clutch in just coming through in clutch moments, but you shouldn't really rely on that as a contender, as a top 5 team. And eventually, as we've seen with many years with the Blazers, that you know close game discrepancy isn't going to fall your way as often as the season goes on, and that's kind of how I'm looking at things with this Bucks team. I think they are contenders, absolutely, but they've got a long ways to go. And I think there's still a trade out there that they should consider making. Maybe Alex Caruso, maybe just some form of perimeter defense, I think, is the move that I would make if I were Milwaukee.
Number 4. I went back and forth on this one. I went back and forth between Denver and Milwaukee, but I'm going to put Milwaukee in this spot. And I've been debating this since a couple minutes ago. You're right. They're playing a lot of close games, games which shouldn't be close. But one thing is, games aren't played on paper. They've been dominant at home so far this year, which I like. And right this week, they begin a 6-game homestand, hoping to bounce back from some recent uneven performances, which you have mentioned. Here's what I'll say about Milwaukee. They're a flawed team, but they're still winning games, and I think they're in my contender tier. They're winning despite some bad habits, especially defensively. Right now, they're 23rd in defensive rating. That's a concern. They're 23rd in defensive rating, and I don't know if that's going to get much better with the current construct of their roster, unless they make a move along the lines of what you mentioned, getting someone like an Alex Caruso or someone like that. They're going to have to make a move to address their defense. But right now, sitting at 16-7 with Dame and Giannis, the way that Dame finishes games, and with their offense ranking 3rd in the NBA, it's hard not to have them in your top 4, at least from my perspective. So there are concerns there, but I can raise concerns about the Nuggets right now, which I'll get to in a minute, and some other teams in this top 10. I don't think there's any team in the league, even with their defense not being necessarily up to snuff, that Milwaukee couldn't beat. What they do last week, they had an overtime victory over the Bulls, and they had it looks like a win over the Knicks and a loss to the Pacers in the in-season tournament. So it's a minor disagreement, but these teams are, I think, in the upper echelon of the NBA. So did you have, I'm guessing, Oklahoma City 4?
Yeah, I had Oklahoma City 4. The top 5 offense and top 5 defense, if that stays, history tells us that makes them a bona fide contender. And from what I've seen from them on the court, I think that backs that up as well, based on how they've been playing. I think Shea is my MVP right now. Or I think for anyone, really, he should be on the short list of maybe 2-3 guys. And if he's not, then it's not a real conversation. I mean, that stat you gave, I think, says it all. The fact that he's putting up 30 and 2 steals, giving you assists, rebounds, and not really dominating the ball either. He's not really a true point guard in a sense. I think Shea and Josh Giddey kind of alternate in the lead ball handler role. So he's scoring from off ball, on ball, off of cuts, just being crafty. And I feel like just with his game, it's like timely buckets as well. It's not just he's putting up numbers, he's putting up buckets, but it feels like every time the Thunder need a bucket, it's him that comes through with the assist or with that deadly mid-range jumper or with just he's the one making the play. And that's really the calling card of every single superstar in the league. And that to me has been the proof that he's a superstar right now. Like if you needed any other explanation of whether or not Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is a superstar, that right there should be all you need to know. I think the Thunder are legit. They're deep. I mean, they're super young and inexperienced in terms of playoffs and all that type of stuff. But for right now, top 5 offense, top 5 defense. I love what Mark Dagnall has done in terms of the ball movement and just their buy-in defensively overall. Like it's just been really sharp.
Okay, so for my number 3, this is where I put the Denver Nuggets. They did not have a good week last week, and for the first time in what seems like forever, Nikola Jokic looked human. And I know that because I have him on my fantasy team. And you look at the numbers, they weren't Nikola Jokic like. He shot 9 for 32 and 9 for 26, respectively, in 2 losing efforts against the Clippers and the Rockets. He was missing short floaters, putbacks that he most always converts most of the time. He did bounce back on Monday night, making 9 of 13 in a win in Atlanta. And I think over the long run, he was 9 of 13, only to then get ejected for arguing what was basically a non-call on Tuesday night in Chicago. So he's had an eventful week, and he hasn't looked like MVP Jokic, but I don't think that's anything necessarily to worry about over the long term. Denver still beat the Bulls, despite Jokic only playing 16 minutes, and Jamal Murray, who ended up tweaking his ankle Monday in Atlanta. But similarly to a lot of these teams that are up here in the top 5, it's hard to beat Denver in Denver. They're 9-1 right now at home this year, and they're in my look. They haven't had a great last week. Their schedule gets easier over their next 8 games. So I think this is going to look a lot better very quickly. That's my projection. Nikola Jokic isn't going to be that bad, maybe ever again. Who knows, though? And I just think there might be just a little, I don't know what the word is. It just might be a little bit of
championship fatigue, maybe.
Yeah, something along those lines during this long grind, trying to defend their title. But their main starting lineup is still pretty unstoppable. They are 9th in offensive rating, 13th in defensive rating. So I like where the Nuggets are at. I'm going to be honest with you. I need to watch more of them because I've been watching other teams. I haven't watched a ton of the Nuggets here lately, but I think I wouldn't rank them right now ahead of the 2 teams I have ahead of them, but I think they're right in that top tier. So do you have anything to add on the Nuggets? Is this where you had them as well?
Yeah, this is where I had the Nuggets. I think the big thing with them is I agree with you on the whole championship fatigue side of this because they came out to start the season when they were fresh and just ready to go. They came out of the season. They came out the start of the season just looking like an absolute juggernaut, looking like the 2016 Warriors even, who ended up winning 73 games. Obviously, they didn't keep that pace up, but I mean, it's still in there. Like even with the quote unquote struggles of Nikola Jokic and the missing Jamal Murray and losing Bruce Brown, they're still close to being top 10 in both offense and defense, which is, in terms of defense, better than where they were at last year as well. I think in terms of defensive rating, I think they were hovering around 15th to 18th most of the season. I think whenever they turn it on and they get hot, they're still completely unguardable. And the next thing is, I think their bench is better than last year. That might be a hot take depending on who you ask because, they lost Bruce Brown, they lost Jeff Green. But this bench unit, Peyton Watson, Zeke Naji, um, they have a young guard off their bench as well that I'm forgetting his name. They have Reggie Jackson as well. All those guys, I think, have really turned into quietly a very solid unit and have been able to have a much better net rating in those non-Jokic minutes that we've always talked about for the Nuggets as being so crucial. And if that translates to later in the season and when the chips are all on the table, if that bench unit is what translates, then the league is in trouble. That's all I'll say. And they may have already been in trouble to begin with.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Okay, so to finish out our power rankings so we can get to gut check with whatever time we have remaining. This was hard for me, but ultimately I decided to go, and it's really, really close. I decided to go Minnesota 2, Boston 1. And real quick, I'll just explain why on both teams. Minnesota, they have been, by a wide gap, at least statistically, the best defense in the NBA so far this year. And that's a large part of what's gotten them to this point. They're first in defensive rating, 106.8. And even with Anthony Edwards missing a little time, the train has kept on rolling. They're continuing to win games. I think this is what, along the lines of what they thought or expected to be defensively when they acquired Rudy Gobert. The offense, though, right now ranks 19th, so around middle of the pack offensively. And this might be nitpicking a little bit, and I understand that. But I think there are times where they get, turnover happy. I think they need to do a better job of taking care of the ball. And their schedule, they've played a decent schedule so far, but it's been pretty light on the lighter end when you compare it to some of these other teams. Their schedule's really going to heat up here in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Jason Timp tweeted out their schedule. Someone had it. I got to find it. But over the next month, actually, they lost to the Pelicans on Monday, and I'm not quite sure if the game at the Mavericks has taken place yet. But at Mavericks, Pacers at home, at the Heat, at the 76ers, against the Lakers, at the Kings, at the Thunder, against the Mavericks again, against the Lakers again, at the Knicks, versus the Pelicans, at the Rockets, at the Mavericks, at the Magic, at the Celtics. So this 17-5 start is fantastic. It's their best start in franchise history, and that has to be acknowledged. It has to be acknowledged how good Anthony Edwards is when he's healthy. It has to be acknowledged how good they are defensively. And I really like what they've done so far this year. But that schedule is going to be a lot different than what they've faced so far this year. And I kind of want to see maybe in 2 weeks we reevaluate where they're at in 2 or 3 weeks after Christmas. But really like what the Timberwolves are doing right now. Are they first in the West? I believe they are, right?
Yeah, yeah.
They're first in the West, 17-5. I'd give them an A+ for what they've done so far this year. But I have Boston ahead of them, and it's just kind of similar to some of the arguments that you and other people have made earlier with the Orlando Magic Lakers thing. When you just watch Boston so far this year, there's not really much at all you can say negative about the Celtics right now. I still worry some about some of the stagnation that still occurs on offense come the playoffs, but that's not what we're really talking about in these power rankings. They've been dominant with their starting lineup. Listen to this stat. Jrue Holiday, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Kristaps Porzingis are outscoring opponents by 27.5 points per 100 possessions when they are on the floor. And that's why I have them. That's why I have them number one. And I think that's enough said. They're also top 10 in both offensive and defensive rating. They're 7th in offensive rating and they're 4th in defensive rating. So I'll stop there and I'll let you talk about your top 2.
Yeah, I had it the same as you. I think there's a lot of different ways you can look at this. I think from the standpoint of the Timberwolves, the argument is okay. We've learned to execute in these close games, and we've had big moments from Cat, big shots from Anthony Edwards and Cat just as a duo in these close game scenarios where everybody questioned how are they going to execute with two bigs on the floor, and they've had those moments already where they've came through. But as you said, there's still a lot more to prove as a team than where the Celtics are at. For the Celtics, they are an established top 5 unit who added Kristaps Porzingis, added Jrue Holiday, and I think you could probably argue are the lone super team in the NBA right now. And waiting on the Phoenix Suns thing, that's different. But right now, I think the Celtics have a 6-man unit that is just untouchable. And I can't really say that about the Timberwolves. And defensively they're fantastic, but at the end of the day, you got to put the ball in the basket. I don't have a ton of questions about will Ant perform in the playoffs? Will everything mesh well in the playoffs once things tighten up? I think they'll be fine, and from that standpoint, but against the top dogs of the league, say in the second round or in the conference finals, are they going to be able to navigate that pressure? And right now it's just like a to be determined, and that we don't really have that question mark over the head of the Celtics. It's
Right.
more so, I mean, they've been in the conference finals last 4 or 5 years, really? I mean, as you said, the stagnation on offense, it's concerning, but I like what Joe Mazzulla has done with the 2-man game between Jaylen Brown and Kristaps Porzingis. We've talked a lot about on this podcast, like the lack of cohesion as a duo between Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. I think adding Porzingis kind of mitigates those problems because you have a running mate for those two now in terms of 2-man game and running those actions. I don't know, man. It's hard for me to look at the Celtics, as you said, and just be like, oh, that's definitely not a finals team. Like, I'm
Yeah,
not saying they for sure will make the finals, but I will say this: if they don't make the finals, it's a disappointment. Like that's a major disappointment if they don't get to the finals.
I would agree with that. So, in summation, we agreed on our top two. Uh, I had Boston 1, Minnesota 2, Denver 3, uh, Milwaukee 4,
Mhm.
Thunder 5, um, Sixers 6, no pun intended. Uh, and then what did I have? I had Magic 7, Lakers 8, Mavericks 9,
Knicks.
and Knicks 10.
Yeah. Pretty similar for me. I'm not gonna go through them. I think let's just get right into gut check. Let's have about I'd say 20 minutes of gut check here. So if you're not familiar with this segment, this is basically where me and Michael will throw a hypothetical statement at each other. Like say uh I don't really have an example off the top of my head, but um basically the other person will have to react to that statement with their gut, hence the name gut check. So just gut reaction to whatever statement we throw at each other. I'll let you start us off.
So I wanted to start off kind of talking about one of the teams that neither of us mentioned in uh, our power rankings. Uh, Last week on his podcast, Jason Timpf, host of Hoops Tonight on the Volume Podcast Network, said this following quote about Tyrese Halliburton. This is the quote. This is the rise of an all-time great. End quote. You think that statement is, let me put it this way. You either agree with that statement, you think that's an overreaction, or it's somewhere in between. That's my question.
It's tough because team success will have a lot to do with it as well. But man, I mean, it's hard to not agree with it, like based on what he's shown individually. Um, he's like a mixture of Steve Nash and like I don't even know. Just his ability to control the game without having the ball in his hands for the majority of the time. Like the usage rate is so much lower than all the other, 30 point per game scoring guards in the NBA. The usage rate is way down. Like he doesn't dominate the ball. He doesn't dribble like that the way we see some other players do. And I think like his style of ball is he just plays the game the right way. Like it's okay. LeBron is kind of the guy I was thinking of because he's a bigger guard. The fact that he has the quickness mixed with the strength to finish through contact, and he has the jump shot already there. He's made his release quicker, so where he can get that shot off anywhere. Yeah, I mean, I'm fully there on the Tyrese Halliburton train. I'm there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough because you're right. Team success will have a lot to do with that, but individually, it's hard to. With his individual success so far this year, it's hard to argue against what Jason Tim said. So I wanted to throw that out there because we we did not mention the play of the Indiana Pacers in our power rankings, and I think they'd be somewhere right on the outside looking in with how they're playing right now. They runner ups in the in season tournament. There are a lot of other things about that team right now that I'm liking. I thought the Pacers could be kind of a sleeper-ish team in the East coming into the season. Kind of like what they're building right now. But yeah, I think there's more conversation down the road to be had about that team. So
For sure.
throw your first gut check at me. What do you have?
All right. My first gut check is Golden State Warriors related. So
I felt this coming.
yeah, I mean, it's not Draymond related specifically. Obviously, there's a lot of Draymond talk around right now with the recent events, with the recent suspension again. Uh, the NBA announced today that he's suspended indefinitely as of today, but that's not what this question is about. My question is with Klay Thompson's lack of a contract extension agreement, and with, I guess, the antics of Draymond Green and the struggles of this team as a whole, is this season the last that we'll see of those three together as a core? Do you buy or sell it?
So you said that Klay Thompson is up for a contract after
Yeah,
this
Klay
year?
Thompson. There was extension talks last off season, but ultimately he's not a free agent until this off season. Um, so with everything that's been going on with this roster, and of course now they've got um, a new general manager in the building as well. So one that's been a little bit more, you know, willing to make trades than their last iteration in their front office. But regardless,
You know
do you
what?
think this season is the last we'll see together of Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and Klay Thompson, of that trio?
I'm buying it. I hate to say it, but I'm buying it.
Yeah,
Given all the information you just gave me, and given the struggles of this team with some of the drama to go along with it, we didn't talk about the Warriors because they're obviously not top 10 right now, but turnovers remain a huge issue. On Friday, in their overtime loss to the Thunder, they committed a league season high of 29 turnovers. That's ridiculous. Uh, they're,
unbelievable.
they're blowing big leads, which we haven't seen with this Warriors team pretty much ever with this core. They can't finish close games. There's a lack of consistency. Right now, with the first quarter of the season behind them, they're sitting below 500. And I think it's time to start asking those difficult questions. Uh, I've been holding out hope because uh, what are they right now? They're 10 and 13. Only three of their first 22 games came against teams that right now are below 500 in the NBA. That's according to Jason Timpf. So I do think their schedule is going to lighten up a little bit, and maybe they can figure some things out and get this thing going more in the right direction. But my gut is telling me to buy that because I don't think they're winning a championship this year. And I just think it's time to probably move on. I don't know who it's going to be. If it's going to be Klay, if it's going to be Draymond. But I think one of the two could be moved, or they will move on from at least one of the two this offseason. That's my
Yeah,
feeling.
yeah. I know Draymond's just signed his extension this past off season, but even with that, I think there's even a chance that both of them are out the door after this season, and I think that's a very real scenario, given that their successors are already in the building, presumably. I mean, Moses Moody has shown good things throughout his career, and Jonathan Kaminga has seemed to turn the corner a little bit as a scorer and just in terms of NBA habits, he's just been a lot more steady as a player in this season. Man, I mean, I'm not cheering for it. Because as much as I've not been a fan of the Warriors for at certain points in their tenure, I mean that era of basketball, they play beautiful basketball. There's no questioning that. So the more I get to see of that trio, the better. But right now, it does not look good at all. The one thing I will say though is I don't think Clay will play this bad for the entirety of the season. I think the one thing that is for sure in my mind is I think Clay will turn it around a little bit. I don't think it's going to look like this for the whole season. If it does, then I mean it is what it is then. But I just don't think there's any way a shooter of his caliber can shoot like this for 82 games. You know?
Yeah, I agree with that. So I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm making things up on the fly.
Yeah,
This is
I
like
am for these next few as well.
this is gut check. So
Yeah.
I had to talk about the Spurs for a minute. Um, and I'm gonna somehow formulate a question around this. So one of the big topics this year in Spurs land is the ineptitude to perform in the third quarter. Listen to this stat. Uh, Part of the reason why the San Antonio Spurs are now, as of tonight, onto a franchise record-setting 18-game losing streak after starting the season 3-2, which actually encouraged me to get Valley Sports Southwest to watch their games, and ever since they have not won a game.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh.
they're a league worst, and this doesn't take into consideration whatever happened tonight. But they're a league worst minus 149 in the third quarter this year. They're minus 149 in the third quarter this year. No other team is minus 100 in any quarter. And the Spurs are minus 149 in the third quarter of games. Out of 22 third quarters coming in, coming into tonight this year, the Spurs have outscored the other team in only one of those third quarters.
Oh
Um,
my gosh.
so these are just horrible stats. But even as a Spurs fan, I get a kick out of it. So there are a bunch of other stats. We know they're on a tough losing streak. They're trying to rebuild. They have Wimby now, so it's at least you can digest it a little better as a Spurs fan, knowing that you have a generational talent who looks like a generational talent at points in times, and has been really good lately, actually. But given all this, given that they're on an 18-game losing streak, you think that I don't know how I want to word this question. You think the Spurs should kick the tires on trading everyone on their roster except Devin Vassell and Victor Wembanyama? Buy or sell? Or maybe not everyone on their roster,
Okay.
but like the
By kick the
Keldon
tires,
Johnson.
do you mean like just do you mean like answering phone calls or do you mean like aggressively shopping?
Let's narrow it down a little bit because
Okay.
they recently signed Zach Collins to a short-term extension. And I think if they put him in the right role, maybe coming off the bench, he'd actually be a really solid player on this team.
Right.
I don't as much like him in the starting lineup. And they're experimenting with Jeremy Sohan at the point guard position. And the young asset that he is, being as young as he is, I don't think they would look to trade him. But say like a Keldon Johnson or some of these other expiring contracts that they have currently on this team, you think they should aggressively pursue trading away a couple of these guys? Or do you think they should continue to try to build as it is?
Um I think it really depends on big picture what the Spurs actual like at some point they've laid out okay, this is our timeline. Year one, we're this. Year two, we want to be competing for this, blah, blah, blah. So right now, I think you would be shopping Keldon Johnson. Yes, 100%. But
with
I
that.
do think it would be beneficial to maybe wait till the trade deadline because I do think there is value to Wembenyama having experience playing with different types of skill sets. And Keldon Johnson is a very unique skill set for sure.
Yes.
Like his shooting isn't, you know, what you would want next to Wembenyama, but ultimately there's going to be, you know, points and times where you're not going to have all four guys able to shoot next to Wemby. So having Wemby, you know, kind of gain experience in that type of, you know, aspect and being able to be effective, I think there's value to that. So, and also just having him in the locker room. He has playoff experience, all those types of things. So I think you wait till the trade deadline, you make the move then. Um, as for anyone else on the roster, um, Trey Jones is an interesting one. It's tough.
Yeah.
I'm
They're in
not
a weird
sure.
spot.
Yeah, it's a really weird spot. I think right now for the Spurs, it's all about habits. It's all about building good habits, and I think you do want to shop Keldon Johnson, but at the same time, he's someone who has played on a USA gold medal roster. Like someone like that with that experience, I think is good to have in the locker room next to Wemby. So from that standpoint, it's also like this season is kind of lost anyway. You want guys that are gonna help in the, you know, development of Wemby and Sohan and those younger guys. So there's multiple ways you could look at it, but in my opinion, I would probably look to trade Keldon.
Okay, and since we're running a little high on time, this will be kind of the second half of that question,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
my last gut check, and then you can throw one or two gut checks back at me, and maybe we can continue with a gut check episode this weekend or sometime in the next week or so, where we incorporate all sports, but we can add some more NBA in there as well.
Yeah.
So Detroit's losing streak, and I know I've gone to the bottom dwellers for my gut check, but I mean, I think we have to talk about this. Detroit's losing streak has now, as of tonight, with their loss to Philadelphia, reached 21 games. Coming into the night, it was at 20. That's the sixth longest streak in the NBA history, in their longest single season slide in Pistons team history. Now it's up to 21 with their loss to Philadelphia. And you look at just the remainder of this week's schedule with at Philadelphia again on Friday, at Milwaukee on Saturday, and then at Atlanta on Monday.
Oof.
And I don't have much beyond that. But you think, what's the record for losing streaks? I'm just wondering. Wasn't it the Sixers back in
I think the Sixers got really close to it to start a season. I think they got to like 0-24 to start a season.
I don't
And
know.
if I remember right, I think it's the 2012 Bobcats that have the record. I think the record is like 28 or 29 in a row.
You think the Pistons get there?
Oh gosh. Oh
Buy
gosh.
or sell?
Um
And I can pull up the rest of their schedule.
I'm gonna buy it. I don't. Dang, I don't know. It's
Because
that team is so bad.
I wanted to give you credit before the season, because I believe, if I remember correctly, in our 5 burning questions preseason preview episode, somehow the Pistons came up and you said there was like a chat or something, if I remember correctly, about Detroit being like a sleeper team, and you said no, that team's gonna suck or
Oh
something like
God.
that. I remember
Oh
this. I don't
God.
remember exactly how it played out, but I remember you saying emphatically, Detroit is going to absolutely suck. And I thought, well, maybe I was thinking in my head, I didn't say it out loud. Uh, I was thinking in my head, well, maybe they can at least be kind of good. I mean, they have some young talent. Maybe they can, do better than you think. But man, it's turned out to be just what you probably thought it
And
was.
you know what? And you know what's hilarious too is last year I had Detroit in the play-in. Oh my God. So I think that was probably a reaction of like, oh, I'm not doing that again. Hell no. Because remember when we would always remember when Jameis Winston was on the Bucks and we would always buy into the hype every year.
Yep.
It's kind of like that. Like it's not quite that because those teams were like usually around 500, but regardless, I'm not biting the cheese again on Detroit until they make some crazy changes. That's all I'm gonna say.
January 10th, the Spurs play the Pistons. So
Oh boy.
one of these teams is going to
Oh.
have to win a game here in the next month.
Is that
Uh,
in San Antonio?
that is in Detroit.
Oh, okay,
Um,
gotcha.
but just in the immediate future, the Pistons, and then I'll let you ask your last questions. Um, they're playing at Philadelphia, at the Bucks, at the Hawks. Then they host the Jazz uh, this upcoming Thursday or a week from tomorrow. And then they get 2 games against the Nets, one at home, one on the road, and then they go at Boston, home for Toronto, at the Rockets, and then the Jazz again. Maybe one of those Jazz games or one of those Nets games they can maybe steal
Maybe, yeah.
on one of these back-to-backs. I don't know, though. The way that it's looking right now, it doesn't look too hot.
Mm, I think they would have to catch one of the opposing teams on the back to back and just on a brutal shooting night.
Yeah.
Because as it stands right now, oh my gosh, like it is so bad. I think I caught 2 seconds of the Detroit game the other night just by accident, just from flipping through channels, and I caught a glimpse of Isaiah Stewart checking up a three, and it was just a brutal air ball, like just massively off to the right. Like wow. um, but yeah,
I'll be honest.
not to like completely just throw shade at Isaiah Stewart. That was not what that was about, but you get the point.
I'll be honest with you. And I wanted to throw these out because it got us a good laugh, but also
Yeah.
because it's interesting just from my perspective. I can't speak for anyone else, but watching bad football really irks me for whatever reason. And part of that's probably because I have to watch the Steelers offense every week. But for whatever reason, college and or pro, watching bad football play itself out over the course of a football game on one or both sides, even if there are 2 bad teams, it ends up being a really good game. There's something that irks me about that. But
Yeah.
watching bad basketball, for whatever reason,
It's just funny.
it's just funny and it's better to watch. Like
Yeah, yeah.
it's not appealing to the eye, but it's just really entertaining. So
It's almost like you're watching Shaqtin' a Fool in real time.
and maybe I have to convince myself of that because I'm a Spurs fan and we're in a difficult spot right now, and it's not the greatest of basketball all the time. But that was just a little comparison between the two sports. So,
Yeah, I
um,
I, I definitely agree with that.
all right. So
Okay. Let me
we
think.
need to get to Dit Hole eventually, but
Right.
throw your last one or two gut checks at me.
Okay. Hmm. All right. Here's where I think I'll go with this. So this season we've had like some young guys, I guess, throw their hat into the MVP discussion. Um, basically, so Shea, Anthony Edwards, De'Aaron Fox. So my question to you is, if you're looking at those three players, like in a vacuum in the stock market, just like for if you're buying stock in anyone, barring health, for the rest of the season, who are you buying stock in and why?
Um,
Between Shea, De'Aaron, and Anthony Edwards.
I think I'd buy stock. This is a good question. It's almost like one of those start, bench, and cut
Yeah,
questions.
yeah,
Um, it's hard for me not to buy stock in Shea, but if
yeah,
we're actually talking about, I'd probably buy stock in Shea. That's my answer. But
yeah,
I don't know like how much more room there is to go up from here for Shea. I mean, he's incredible, but how much greater can it get? Maybe it gets a lot greater. I'm not denying that it can't, but if my my next would probably be Anthony Edwards because the part of the question is health provided, but that's a really tough question. I'd want to come back and readdress that at some point. What's your
yeah,
opinion
for
on it?
sure. I think I'd probably go with the same there, but man, De'Aaron, man, he has been so good this year.
Yeah,
It's tough because it feels like De'Aaron, he's been in the league longer than those first two guys, and this is this is really the season where he's been at a all-star level for a while. Like last year was his first all-star appearance, but he's been at that 24 point per game level for a while now. And this is the year where he's stepped it up to 30 plus points per game, like at that, you know, superstar clip. Um, so it's hard to view him in the same light because he's older and he's been around longer, and it's just it's just easier to feel like this might be closer to the ceiling just because he's later into his career from that standpoint. So I think Shea and Ant is where I'd go. And also the fact that Shea and Ant are also on the better rosters
yeah,
right now. So I think that plays a part in it as well.
absolutely. All right, one more. Throw one more at me, and then we got to get out of here.
Ooh, okay. Let me think of one quick. Um, okay. It's going to be Mavericks related because I watch a lot of Mavericks basketball.
Fair enough.
Okay, so hmm.
I asked you a Spurs question, so you absolutely have the right to ask Mavericks
Okay,
one.
let me think of something. There's a lot on my mind in terms of the Mavericks, but this is like if I got to fit into one question. Okay, so in terms of Luka Doncic,
Mm,
um, so he's been a 30-point per game scorer for a while now. He's hovered around the 39-9 number for a while now, but this year he's hired a nutritionist and a strength and conditioning coach, and has presumably started to take his health more seriously in terms of like taking care of his body. So from that standpoint, do you buy into I guess Luka even going up a level? Because we've said for years now, if Luka just gets in shape, who knows what he can do? And now he's in shape. So do you see Luka stepping it up even further than what he has already? Like, is there another level to go for Luka Doncic? Just in terms of, like, you can look at it any possible way you want to. It could be scoring, passing, defense, whatever the case may be. What do you think in terms of Luka Doncic's ceiling?
It's what did Michael Jordan say back a couple years ago? The sky's the roof or something like that.
Ceiling is the roof.
The ceiling is the roof. That's what I think about Luka Doncic. It's if he's taking care of his body, he's taking nutrition more seriously, and with already what he's done, he's 24-ish years
Yeah,
old.
24 years old, turns 25 in February.
I'd argue he's kind of just really entering his physical prime as an athlete. I think there's a lot of room he can still get better defensively, although he has improved in some areas. I still think there's another level he can get to, probably offensively. I wouldn't doubt it, just because, and I know this is pretty simple reasoning, but to put it simply, Luka Doncic is a bad motherfucker.
Yeah.
And that's really all that needs to be said. So, and I have a little bias there because I watch him go against the Spurs whenever the Mavericks play the Spurs, and it's like the ball doesn't go anywhere but the basket most of the time.
He's
But
got something special for the Spurs, man. It's weird. If the Mavs ever play the Spurs in a playoff series, oh boy.
Yeah, we'd have to put Wemby on him and just pray at that point. And Wemby's excellent defensively already, but I don't know if there's anything that stops that bad motherfucker when he's going offensively. I do think there's another level he can get to as a player. I buy that for sure.
Yeah, I think just in terms like the little things I mentioned earlier in terms of like pace and controlling the flow of the game, getting his teammates involved. I think this year he's already taken strides in it. But just the little things like just like boxing out and little things like that just have always seemed to be too little of a task for him in some ways. And it's not that he's incapable. It's just that he just doesn't. He hasn't done it. And we've seen a little bit more of that this year. But moving forward, I think that's the level where you can get to. I think in terms of winning a championship, you want your superstar to your superstar doesn't have to be he doesn't have to be Kawhi Leonard defensively, but your superstar does have to show championship level effort because that everybody else on your team feeds off of that energy.
Yeah, I agree. Loved this episode. Absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
I think we all had the same top 10 teams, but a little bit of a different order. Mm-hmm. It was time that we had to talk NBA. I want to do another NBA episode around the New Year's. After the Christmas, after we get a couple more weeks sample size, where I think there's some rookie conversations that we didn't really get into tonight that we can get into then. I think it's probably too early to start talking awards, but give it a couple more weeks and maybe there's some awards conversations we can start to have. Yeah. I like the burning questions segment that we've done in the past for NBA. I think it works really well with that. There's more gut check that we could do. There's a bunch of things that we could do with the NBA that I think we'll have another NBA episode before the month is all said and done for you guys. So I really enjoyed this. How about you?
Yeah, I really liked it also, and I completely forgot about the in-season tournament question that I had for you for gut check. So we'll get to that next time also because I have some stuff to say on that as well. But yeah, this was a really good episode. I always enjoy doing NBA. I'm a bit of an NBA nerd, so
yeah. And I've really enjoyed this year as well. I think the in-season tournament overall was an overall success. Yeah. Maybe in our next episode, we can talk about some of the tweaks that they could potentially make to make it better moving forward. But overall, I thought it was really, really good.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed the semifinals and the final game between the Pacers and the Lakers. So with all that being said, thank you guys for tuning in. We're hopefully going to be back on here in the next 10, 15 minutes for an episode of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. So tune into that. If you don't catch our episodes live, remember you can find them on our YouTube channel under the live. Most of them are now under the live section.
Yeah, the live tab.
The live tab. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And maybe the easiest place to get it, if you're on Twitter or X all the time like myself, you can just follow us on X, and most of our live streams you can view on our Twitter feed. So all that being said, thank you to Emmy. Thank you to myself, I guess. Thank you to whoever's been watching this entire time for the entirety of this 90-minute NBA episode. And we'll see you here shortly for Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. So just like the chances of the Pistons winning a game anytime soon, we are gone. Peace.
Peace out.